Welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk, everyone. So I've been looking forward to the guest that we have on today, and I'm going to butcher your name, but it's Juan Jimenez. Did I say it okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Close enough?
Close
It's
enough.
not Juan Jimenez.
It's definitely not that, but if you said that, I probably still would have been like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. That's cool. You're good about stuff like
Yeah.
that. But it's great to have you on, Juan. Thank you so much for being on. And I'd just like to kind of introduce you a little bit. You own a house on a rock, home inspections down in we're going to say Midlothian area, Richmond, Virginia, that general vicinity, and a multi-inspector firm. And when I was cyber stalking you, just on Google alone, you have over 1,400 five-star reviews
Yes,
for
sir.
any business, let alone a home inspection company. That's impressive, man. Kudos.
Thanks. Thanks. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And I know you credited Blip a lot with Shein and Blip and all that. Blip is a software for anybody that doesn't know. We don't own it. We just like it. But you've had to work really hard at doing really good inspections for a really long time to get that many good reviews. So that says a lot about you and your business.
Thanks. Thanks. I appreciate that. And yeah, definitely, Blip does all the automation, but yeah, you still have to do a good job to get
Yeah.
good reviews. Yeah.
Yeah, then you just automate bad reviews if you do a bad job.
Right.
But
Yeah, exactly.
but that's going to be a nice lead into our subject here in a little bit. But can you tell me a little bit more about yourself? How did you get into inspections? How long have you been in business in one form or another? Anything that you'd like to share?
Sure. So, been in business like almost 12 years, I think. Yeah. Um, And basically, I was getting out of the Marine Corps and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I bought a home and I saw the inspector and I was just like, oh, I think I could do that. And he charged me $350. And at the time, that was like a ton of money. So I was like, man, I think I can do this. And it would definitely help financially. Um, so in Virginia, there was no licensing at the time. You could just start. You could just be like, "Oh, I'm a home inspector," and I did the courses and started the business. And I only really wanted or needed like one a month. That was a sales pitch to my wife. Like, look, if we can get one a month, that's $350. Like, we were so poor. We were like dirt poor, and that was my pitch to her. And I just started, and um, I'm kind of have a tendency to always just do the best I can, and it kind of just blew up from there. So I didn't mean for it to be this big thing. Um, I just wanted some money, and I thought I had the skill set, but yeah, it turned into something much bigger and better than I had planned.
Well, that says a lot about you in a lot of different ways, but that's a great self-made man story. You
Thanks.
saw something, you worked hard for it. And, ex-military, you guys tend to make really great home inspectors. Not afraid to get dirty. You work well with other people and you figure things out and you have a go-get-'em attitude typically,
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, there's other factors, but I see a lot of that happening and it's good. And I do have to say, for most of our listeners are listening in the audio only of the podcast. But if you have a chance to watch this on YouTube, there's a great visual in Juan's background of Mr. Bean holding a teddy bear, which is both frightening and awesome. So,
yeah,
but
there
yep,
is.
there he is, Mr. Bean. Apparently, one of your employees left it outside your door and scared the snot out of you one day, right?
Yes, exactly. They started a prank war. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. Oh well. So it's still going on. So that should be interesting. We'll have to listen to more
Right,
stories.
right.
Very nice. So you actually brought up a great subject today, and I really loved it, and I was really excited to talk about it. Anybody who listens to our podcast knows that we talk a lot about how, let's take, for example, back in the 90s, average home inspection fee was about $350 in the mid 90s, $350.
Hmm.
And it hasn't gone up that much higher
Right,
in almost 20, 30 years.
right.
It's insane. The average home inspection fee now is just a little over $400 nationally. I mean, you account for inflation. We're making less than half of what we used to, but now we
Sure.
have licensing, more certifications, more training, more equipment, more everything, and we're making less. So we talk a lot about raising the prices,
Okay.
but you added in another dimension that
hmm
is really important. Charge more, but be more. What does that mean, Juan? Can you explain?
Well, I think yeah, home inspectors talk about it a lot, but they generally, when I see the conversations on forums and Facebook, it's sort of like this arbitrary charge more, you know, and it's almost like a lot of it almost seems to come from a place that like we don't know how to, but if we're putting the burden on everybody else to drive our own profit margins up. So it's like
Hmm.
it's like inspectors feel like, well, I'm having trouble because there are cheaper inspectors, so I need them to charge more so that I can charge more. And that seems to be and it's very arbitrary though. Like, just charge more, charge what you're worth. But it's like, how, why, and there's not a lot of discussion about how to actually do that. Just that it needs to be done, and it's usually so for the poster's own benefit, so I can charge more. I definitely think we need to talk more about how we would go about doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. There was a post not long ago, and it was another home inspector talking about in other industries, they have always had their prices go up. He paid X amount of dollars for a service industry service 10 years ago, and now it's almost twice as much now.
Sure,
And he's like, why don't we do that in the home inspection industry? And it actually kind of popped into my head. I'm like, that kind of almost sounds like price fixing at that point. It's like, let's just charge more.
sure, yeah. It
But
is
it's
a
like, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it does have that vibe, like charge more. Everybody charge more. We're all make more money. It has that like price fixing monopoly vibe sound to it. Yeah.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, there's another dimension to it. So I always use McDonald's a lot as an illustration because sometimes we view it as like a commodity. It's a burger. I
Right.
pay X amount of dollars for a quarter pound of beef at Burger King versus McDonald's, so I went to here instead of there. But it's like if you're both Burger King and McDonald's and you both say, "Hey, let's raise our prices," you're still giving people the same burger, just
Right.
more expensive.
Right.
you know.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly.
that whole be more mentality. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that. So how do you think we can go about legitimately raising our prices? What's a good avenue for you, or that you think home
Uh,
inspectors could imitate?
right. So I think the first thing, and I had to give it a lot of thought, but I think the first step is that home inspectors really need a fat dose of humility before they can raise their prices. Because the conversation usually goes, you know, well, I charge more because I'm the best, or you should charge more because you're providing such an awesome service, or, we're the only unbiased party and we're the most important people in the whole transaction, and we need to be more humble first before we can charge more because, you know, all of this, me, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. I don't leave my house for less than this much money, or I know what I'm worth. None of that, none of the conversation around raising the prices ever revolves around the consumer. What they're getting. It's always about the inspector and how awesome they are. And so I think first, we need to take, we need some humble pie and realize, a lot of us are really the same. A lot of inspectors, we're not really that much better than anybody else. Um, and even if we are the best, we need to be able to communicate that with the client in a way that they will understand. Um, and so humility and communication, I think, are the biggest things. And neither one of those things has to do with how good we are as inspectors. Um, but yeah, of course, I think if we're humble, then that provides us the avenue to become better inspectors and offer a better service. Um, so I know that's sort of like a, you know, or what's the, like a very sort of mysterious answer, but yeah, I think we need to be humble first.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's an enigmatic answer at all, actually.
Right,
And I think you summed it up well with two things that you said, humility and communication.
right,
So I totally agree with you on both of those things. I talk to inspectors every day. It's just all
sure,
the time.
yeah,
And unfortunately, sometimes the answers I get are, well, I've done everything I can and people should hire me because I'm good. It's basically what it comes down to. It's like, well,
yeah,
first of all, we should be humble enough to know, hey, that guy that's been doing it for 25 years may be better than you.
absolutely,
And I've had to have humble pie too, because it's easy to compare ourselves to a bad inspector because it stands out more.
sure,
You know, we go and we follow somebody who did a pre-listing inspection. They missed this, 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 and this, and we walk away. And for the next 6 months, we think about how amazing we are compared to a guy that did a terrible job.
right,
And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Feel good about yourself that you did a great job, but a little bit of humility there, saying for every one of those, there's another guy that's better. If I
right,
got followed on an inspection, are
right,
they going to do better than me? So it's basically having a realistic view of ourselves. And then communication, what do we add to the buyer? We need to be able to communicate that. If we can't communicate that, or if our answer is the standard, well, I know more about a house than anyone else. I've been
right.
in construction for 20 years. I'm more thorough. Those are not answers.
They're
Those
not
are ad lines on a website,
right, and
you know?
they're not going to resonate with the person on the phone. You know,
No.
you can't tell the person on the phone, well, you know, we charge this much more because every time we go behind a home inspector, we find defects that they missed. Like, one, they're not going to believe you, and two, they don't care. Like, you know,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that is not going to work.
Well, you know, it's funny. Going back to the burger illustration, McDonald's raising their prices and Burger King doing it, whatever. But I went to this gourmet burger place, and you could tell that they spent years perfecting this burger.
Absolutely.
And on the menu, the description is a very short line of this burger is a proprietary mix of not only locally sourced beef, but locally sourced lamb that we have experimented with for X amount of years to get it just right. And then a slice of this cheese, which is made down the road, etc. And when they bring it to you, it's amazing. Like, I bought it because of the description, but it's like 3 sentences.
Right.
So can they charge more for that burger? Oh yeah.
100%. Yep.
Yep. I don't even know if I asked. It just looked amazing. I'm just like, I need that burger.
Right.
So a little bit of humility on their part made them step back and say, I could throw a burger out here and say it's better than McDonald's. But does that really command the price that I'm looking for? Can I spend some time honing that burger, thinking about what are the 3 clear points about this burger that make it amazing and better than anywhere else? And if we can't do that, if we can't step back humbly and say, hey man, where do I stink as either a businessman or a home inspector?
Right.
We're never really going to command that price. James Gante, he was on the podcast, oh man, probably a year or two ago now, and he talked about that. How
Hmm.
he goes and does continuing education way more than a state requires. If the state requires 24, he's doing like 3 times that in continuing education and then some. And you know, he already kind of knows his stuff. And he's
Right.
like, and that's why I can charge, I think he said like $800 for his average home inspection with a couple of add-ons, where most people in his market are charging 250 to 350.
Right. Right.
It's gourmet burger. Is that kind of what you're getting at with your angle too?
Yeah. Yeah. And I tend to focus more on the fact that if this burger company hadn't communicated it, the what was so special about their burger, they'd still only be able to charge so much for it. You know, it really came down to how they separated that burger from other burgers. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because I'm sure there are plenty of other burgers in the area from locally sourced beef, and but if you can't communicate it, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So it's the fact that I tend to focus a lot on that. It doesn't matter even if you are the best, if you cannot communicate it to your
Mm.
clients in a way that they will appreciate, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because even the best home inspectors are still going to be charging 250 to compared to a home inspector who's just a really good communicator who might actually be worse, but they're charging more. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't go to as many classes as James, but I definitely focus on how we're communicating with the person on the phone.
So, besides making myself very hungry now, I'd really love a burger.
Right.
I think your communication point is very much key, and I think it's the skill that we lack most as an industry, which is
Absolutely.
interesting. I've had
Hmm.
home inspectors email me, say, "I'd like this on my website," or "We'd like this feature on our app," or whatever,
Mm,
and then we ask questions back and forth, and finally we have to call them. And a common thing that I kind of chuckle at is, "I'm sorry, I really have a hard time in life putting my thoughts into words." And I'm like, that's
mm,
really half our job anyways. We
right.
have to
It
see
is.
something and put it into writing.
Right.
So we oftentimes, I think, spend a lot of time working on the input and not the output.
Mm,
So I know a lot about a house. Okay.
hmm.
If how do you communicate it? That's like having a Corvette engine but no wheels. It's going to run really great on the inside, but it's not going to go anywhere. It
Right.
doesn't
Right.
deliver anything. So yeah,
Absolutely.
communication is key. Yeah, I agree because I always tell years ago, almost 20 years ago, when I started my first inspection company, there was this home inspector, and I was always like, man, how does he kill it that bad? He's doing awesome,
Right.
and he really. He's retired now, so I can say he wasn't good. It was not a good scene. And he would even kind of like indicate that a little bit. I was like, yeah, I could do better here or there. But he was just such a charismatic, good communicator that people were drawn to him.
Right.
So what skills he did have, he was able to spin it.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, this other home inspector offers infrared, which was a big deal back then. They offer infrared. Yeah. But, let me talk about my strengths. I found this, and he was able to spin
Exactly.
it so no matter what the other guy had under the hood, so to speak, his wheels they were taking him places. How he was able to communicate.
Right.
So
Right.
now we know there's a problem. Not all of us are great communicators. How do you think a home inspector can learn to be a better communicator?
Well, I think there's, you know, instinctively there's two routes that you can go, right? If you suck at picking up the phone and communicating, then you can just hire somebody, right? You
Yeah.
can hire somebody who's good at it. Um, that's certainly one option because we all can't become great communicators.
Hmm.
Um, but two, I think you, there's so many sources out there, podcasts and videos and books. I mean, it's all free too. I mean, you don't charge anything for this podcast, right?
No, not a bit.
Right. It's all free. I mean, there's so much free information on how to, and really it's about being a better salesperson on the phone, even though a lot of people don't like that word. Um, it's really just about being a good salesperson on the phone. And, and if you're not good at that, to put as much effort into that as you do um, learning about houses. You have to put, if you go to 8 hours of continuing education for roofs, then you need to spend 8 hours learning how to be a better salesman because that's half your job as well. That's half your role in your company is to be a salesperson.
It's interesting that you say that too, because a lot of guys, um, I've had many guys tell me this. I'm not a salesperson, and that's not going to change.
Yeah.
And or my favorite one is they should hire me because I'm better,
Right.
not
Right.
because I'm salesy. And my response has always been the
Mm,
same. If you're that good, why are you having such a hard time selling yourself?
right.
So if we can't, I think the beginning of being a good communicator of why to hire us, I actually have a script on one of our on our website that home inspectors can download and
Mm-hmm.
input with their own information. So adapt that script to you. There's your
Right.
phone script. It can get you through a 10 to 15-minute phone call, less, more, whatever you want, and it helps you highlight and it forces you to sit down and say, what are the three things that actually set me apart from everyone else?
Right.
Literally and physically. Don't say, well, I do infrared. Everybody does it. Don't
Exactly.
say, I do a thorough inspection. Everybody's saying that. What actually sets us apart so that we can say, and, we always throw that USP, unique selling point,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Step back and say, what would you want to hear? When you call a contractor, what do you want to hear?
Right.
I think that's the beginning of good communication is having it clear on our own mind instead of when somebody calls just trying to wing it and think about, oh, well, I don't know, I guess this or that. Write it out. Three things. What are our unique selling points? Which is hard. It really is. I mean, if somebody pressed me right now, what are your unique selling points? I'm like, well, I can squeeze into a crawl space pretty good. you know, I was actually thinking about that the other day. I don't really get in underneath houses, but I had to, in my own house, I have this small crawl space. There's a little tiny window, and I'm not I'm not overly wide, but I'm not overly skinny. But
Mm-hmm.
I was able to get in. I'm like, ha, there you go. That's why that's why I
UFP.
was a home inspector. Yeah, USP right there. Joking. But does that kind of make sense to you? Maybe even just writing it down.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a great start. Um, pretty anti-script. Um,
Yeah.
because again, uh, and I think scripts are really good for a lot of people. I tend to think scripts are really, one-sided. You write a
Hmm.
script and it's all about the things that you're going to say. And we tend to focus more on what the customer is going to say on the phone.
Hmm.
And essentially, what I tell my phone person and other inspectors who ask is we let them write the script, right? So, if somebody calls and they're like, "Hey, we need a home inspection," I'm like, "Oh, why? What's going on?" Like, "Oh, well, we just got a contract on the house," and then, "Oh, well, did you see anything wrong with it?" And then right then they're like, "Oh, well, we saw that the roof might be old," and you're like, "Okay, what's the address?" And then we look it up, can see that I can walk on it. Like, oh, based on the pictures, yeah, it does look kind of old. Just so you know, we are going to walk on this roof and we'll be able to know the age and the condition, let you know if there's any defects with it. And I'm not going to go over the whole conversation, but now just that one thing, they told us they're worried about the roof, right? And
Hmm.
so maybe our USP is that we walk on roofs, right? But I didn't know it was important to them until they said, well, we're worried about the roof.
Mm.
So you might have all these USPs, but um, the ones that you say might not be ones that the client cares about. So you ask questions, you get them to tell you everything it is that they want, and then you confirm that you're listening and that you are going to do those things, or how you're going to do those things, or how that's going to play out in your inspection, and sort of subliminally why you'll be the best choice for them, because they'll go over the things that are most important to them, and then you just repeat it back to them, and then they're like, oh, this is the company, this is the one. They're going to do all the things that were important to me, and then you give them the price, and they pay whatever you want. They're not going to
So
waste. Go ahead.
no, please.
Well, they're not going to have to go to another company, right? Because and they might not even know yet what is important to them, so you're kind of extracting it out of them, and then while they're kind of figuring it out, you're also telling them you're going to do it. There's no reason for them to call anybody else. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, this guy's listening. He's going to do all the things that I wanted. He just told me. Sounds like everything we need is going to be addressed by this company. So, yeah. And then you're like, yeah, $600. And they're like, oh. Sometimes you can hear it. They're like, oh, but they still go
Hmm.
because They're like, this guy, he's the one. He gave me everything I needed. So, yeah, we're sure, fine, $600. I thought it was going to be less, but we're going to go for it. You can almost charge them anything at that point.
So I wholeheartedly agree. And I don't know if you know this, but you basically laid out several old school marketing tricks. Marketing has not changed in 6,000 years. It's
Exactly.
the same.
It's been the same.
Our script actually does some of the things that you mentioned. I like your adaptive USP, though. I'd like to talk about that in a minute. But
Oh,
in the
good way
script,
to
we
explain
actually
it.
say
Mm-hmm.
adaptive USP. Yeah, so you adapt to the person. Our
Yeah,
USP may be I'm a level 2 thermographer, but they don't know or care about that. You know,
don't care. Right? Yep.
maybe their dad's an electrician, and our USP is we were an electrician for 40 years. They don't
Right. They
care
don't
about
even
that.
care. Exactly.
Yeah. So adaptive USPs, which I like to talk about in a second, but one of the things that you mentioned was, and the term escapes me right now, but basically, you get the client to have a vested interest in you. Every
Mm-hmm.
minute that you keep them on the phone and they explain something, the more likely they are not going to call somebody else because they don't want to
Mm,
subliminally do that again. So car salesmen use this trick. And we mentioned it in a previous podcast where a car
mm,
salesman knows if you test drive a car, you're going to be there for half an hour. If you test drive another one, if he can make you wait. You often notice how there's like nobody else in the building, but your salesman makes you wait. I'm like,
yeah.
how long does it take to go get a key? What they're doing is actually keeping you there because the longer you're there, the less likely you are to go through that process again
Mm,
with someone else. So in the script that we have, we actually say keep them on the phone for 5 to 10 minutes. Have them
right.
talk about everything, ask them all the problems, their concerns. Uh, and the reason you do that is 5 to 10 minutes in, our conversion rate went from 50 to 90 some odd percent
Right.
because they're like, if every phone call that I make, I have to explain this, and this guy is already giving me everything that I need. I'm just not going to make another phone call. This is too much. Let's just go with this guy.
Right.
It's one of the oldest sales tricks in the world. It's a vested interest that they have in you now.
Right.
The adaptive USP that you mentioned, that's something that's not built into my script and that I love because our USP may be, I'm a certified master inspector, which that's a
Mhm.
whole different podcast,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of different
Right.
opinions
Right.
on that, a whole
Right.
different podcast. But maybe they don't really care about that. Maybe their cousin's a home inspector out in the Midwest and they're buying a house back east. And they're like, I don't care about any of that. My cousin told me to look for a guy that is XYZ. But if we didn't ask them, we don't know. And now we're giving them USPs that unique selling points that they don't care about. So I love
Right.
that adaptive USPs. So
Yeah. Plus, I think saying I'm a level 3, level 2 thermographer, it might not resonate with them. Whereas if they're like, well, we're worried about leaks. We're worried about leaks in the walls.
mhm.
Well, your USP was you do thermal imaging, right? And if you charge more for it, now you're about to sell it. But you're like, oh, well, just so you know, we do thermal imaging, and that can help us, scan the house, check for thermal anomalies, and confirm with moisture, or however you want to say it, But basically, you just now you can present it in a way that does resonate with them.
Mm.
Um, because just saying I'm a thermal imager, they might not even know what thermal imaging is yet. They're worried about leaks, but they don't know what thermal imaging is, maybe. And now you can bring it in a way that they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Makes sense to me. They're either going to hire you, or if they were going to hire you already, then you charge more. Now you can add on that service real easily. Um, like, yeah, we charge $99 for it. And they're like, oh, absolutely, sure. For hidden leaks, sure, absolutely, go for
Man, you're talking my language. So
it.
that goes back to our charge more, but be
Right,
more. So
exactly.
be a better inspector that has more services that you're
Mm,
qualified for, that you can
right,
get 1,400 reviews like you that are 5-star. You have to be amazing to have that. Number two, be more of a salesman and not just an inspector. We
right.
gotta we gotta have the wheels. If we're really that awesome, we really need to be able to sell. And we're not that awesome. Get more awesome, and then at the same time know what we do bring to the table.
Right.
So,
Right.
everybody likes to tell the story of how they became a home inspector, and you saw an inspector and you're like, hey, I could do that. A lot of times though, they say I had a bad inspection, so I became an inspector,
Right.
and it's
Right.
like, okay, cool. Now, what's your USP after that? Like, what makes you better than that inspector that gave you a bad inspection?
Right. Well, I'm just better. Right.
I'm just better. Yeah, I'm not going
Yeah.
to do that to somebody. How? You know,
Right.
it's like it's like an ice skater saying, "Hey, if you jump up here, I'll catch you, and I'm not going to drop you." How do I know? Like,
Right.
have you been doing a lot of lats and delta exercises, man?
Right.
Let's
Right.
just give me some proof.
Right.
you know, but I really love that idea. That's something that I'm going to take with me. Adaptive USPs. So listen to the consumer, which we try to do.
Hmm.
We really want them to talk, but we had a different angle before. I think we're going to include that more. So if they mention leaks, we talk about infrared. If they talk about plumbing, we talk about our sewer scopes and our certifications. And maybe even for me, you sound like you can do it a little bit more off the cuff than me. I like to sit down with a little chart and I like to process map everything. So I might actually sit down and say, okay, if they mention this, here's where you can go, and do a little tree so that little notes so that my people answering the phones can say, oh, okay, they mentioned this, and check off that box.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
I
really
mean,
like that a lot.
yeah. I mean, if you and your people are visual diagram tree people, then yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Well, and I say that only because too, um, you sound like a natural communicator. But for somebody who's not a natural communicator,
Right.
writing things down does help. So it's kind of like I'm not a natural at math. Anybody who's heard me try to do math on this show would laugh. So I have to write it down. But once I write it down, I can do it. So it's just
Right.
like any other thing that maybe we're not natural at, like you with
Right.
communication. Write it down and we can go back to our notes. We don't want to read it, but we can say, oh, okay, they said this. Maybe I can go here now. For us, we do a lot of stuff. We do home inspections, wells, radon, or mold assessments and mold clearances, which is a New York thing, septic systems, sewer scopes. We do a whole bunch of services. So we we try to upsell those as part of our USP.
Right.
Like a good example of not that we purposely did it as a USP, but we often heard people say, "I'm having a heck of a time getting the septic guy out there the same time as you." Because the
Mm,
agents only wanted to make one appointment. So
sure.
that's when we got into septic inspections. So now we're like, well, you don't have to worry about that. We can do the septic inspection, one appointment, one inspector, one check. And that mattered to them because it's really hard because the septic guys are like, well, I have a pump out at 11. I can try to be there at 1, but I don't know, you know.
Right. Right.
So even adding on services, being more can be our USP, or at least one of them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think the more services you offer, if you actually go through the training and buy quality tools to do them,
Yeah.
uh, then yes, obviously that should add more money, um, as long as you then learn how to sell it to the customers. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. It sounds like you have a lot of additional services. If you don't mind me asking, what kind of services do you offer besides your base home inspection?
We do radon, chimneys, infrared, termite, um, and sewer scopes. I think
That's
that's it.
awesome.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Those tend.
the chimney thing, that's one that's going to be the next big thing in my opinion.
Yeah.
More and more, it's becoming a process that home inspectors take on.
Exactly.
Kind of like 10 years ago, nobody really did sewer scopes for the most part. It wasn't
Right.
as heard of. And then
Right.
because it was a plumber's job, and now we kind of take it over. I think we're
Exactly.
going to take over, chimney inspections and level twos and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think so too. I like. I mean, I wasn't around when home inspectors first started testing radon, but it seems
Hmm.
we've become the like radon testers, home inspector. We're like, I
Yeah.
would I would estimate like just complete guess that home inspectors are performing like 90% of the radon tests, professional radon tests in the States. Like it's got to be some ridiculously high number like that. And it just
Yeah.
became, we're the ones who do it. And I think, yes, chimneys and sewer scopes and termites and probably even well and septic, I think we're going to be the ones who take on that role, at least in a real estate transaction.
Yeah, and even not like in New York State, there's no licensing for septics, but in
Mm-hmm.
my area, most of the septic inspections I would guess now are being done by inspectors for real estate
Yeah.
transactions.
Yeah.
But then you go to like Massachusetts and New Jersey and a couple states around us, and they actually do have licensing for it. New Hampshire, I believe, is another one,
Mm.
and that's being taken over by the home inspection industry because we're already equipped to do it.
Right.
But
Right.
that's just an interesting side point. But it just shows that you work hard to be more. So I know you say that you don't maybe do as much continuing education as James Gante, and he goes very hard into the, I want to be the better inspector. But you have a lot under your belt there that you are well equipped to do. And I go back to the reviews. You're obviously very well equipped to do it and good at it because you don't get that many good reviews stinking up the joint, you know?
Right. 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 Yeah, I think the reviews is probably the other major factor because they can come when they come, they're primed and ready to pay a premium. You know,
Hmm.
they don't see 1,400 5-star reviews and be like, "Oh, I bet they're a cheap company." Like, you know, I bet this is the lowest priced one. Let me go here. Like, they're not doing that. You know, they're coming primed, ready to pay either at least an average price or probably a premium price. So that'll go a long way too. But we didn't always have that. So then you got to learn the
Yeah.
hard way to to get them to pay.
Yeah. I mean, you're at a point where your USPs are all over the place. You have tons of them. Maybe somebody starting out or in the middle of their business development, maybe they don't have that many, but understanding what they are and communicating them is important. Um, Actually, anyone who's listening, we did a podcast on how to become a better communicator. I
Hmm.
believe it was last year. You can go back and listen to it. There's some tips and tricks because not all of us are great communicators. It's ironic that I have a podcast here, but I was actually not a great communicator for a long time. I had to learn how to pull the levers and do all the tricks. And you can't look stuff like if you can't look somebody in the eye, look them in right in between the eyebrow.
Right.
Stuff like that,
Right.
and just be a better communicator on the phone or in person because that's important too because the sales don't stop once you've booked the inspection. It
Right.
happens the entire process through the inspection. We
Right.
need to
I agree.
communicate well with them there. And
Yes.
I don't know about you, but we upsell on site. So like sewer scopes, that's usually going to be upsold on site a lot of the time because it's
Mm.
like, okay, well they didn't order one, but you're looking at this old galvanized uh, pipe that's half falling apart, and you're like, you want me to run a scope through that? But now how we present that is going to matter if they hire us or not. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
oh yeah, you should really get a scope in there. I got it right in the truck, $400. Okay,
Right.
that's not you're not communicating the
Oh,
value.
right.
Now, if you point it out and you say, hey, are you concerned about this? Like you said, your method. Are you concerned about this? I don't know. Should I be? Well, I'm like, it's old. And, there is known to be Orangeburg piping in this area. Would you like us to put a sewer scope in there? A lot different communication there. You're
Exactly. Yeah,
empathetic, you're listening, and you're giving them a solution to a problem. So
absolutely.
never upsell anything that nobody needs, though. But I think everybody needs a sewer scope. I don't care what it is.
I agree. I agree. It's not pushy, if it's going to provide them value and they're going to get a great benefit from it.
Hmm. What's the most expensive sewer scope issue that you've ever found?
It was it was so, I don't remember the exact price, but I remember it was upward of 10,000 because it was a main road and they were going
Hmm.
to have to like contract with the Department of Transportation to like block it off and dig up the sidewalk and all of that stuff. So it became very expensive.
Oh yeah, I remember one time the most expensive sewer scope issue that I ever found. I didn't even need to run the scope. I just walked in the backyard and I said, "I smell poo." And so I'm like, "Okay, well, let's." And I looked, and they were daylighting their black water into their neighbor's cornfield,
Oh my
and
God.
it was a lake. There was black water fines, not like a
Wow.
literal lake. I mean, it was just this
Yeah, yeah.
giant puddle of poo water from years of just dumping it in there. Black
Mm,
water fines. I don't know what the neighbor ever did with them. They didn't have a leach field, so I mean, there's what 5 to 10 grand for a leach field.
right. Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
never had to run the scope. I go, hey, look, there you go, poo water. But you shared some knowledge here today, and I learned something. And again, I've
Cool,
said it like
cool.
5 times during this podcast, but I'm going to remember it. Adaptive USPs, and I
I
think I'm
like
going to
that
put that into
one. I like
practice.
that one.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
made it up.
yeah, I figured. I like it. I'm
Yeah,
going with it.
yeah. So we'll go ahead and use that term.
All right.
But
Point
I,
of
I really
scarcity.
like that. Um, you can do it off the cuff because you're a good communicator. I think I'm going to write it down. But either way, the big takeaways: charge more, but be more. Be a better inspector. Offer more services that we're qualified for. Be more in the sense of also being a better communicator and working at that. And I think my favorite expression from you today was if we do 8 hours of continuing education on
Mm,
how to inspect the house, do 8 hours of continuing education on how to be a better communicator. Take a
yeah,
course, watch some YouTube videos, listen to our communication podcast. And that's a good suggestion. So thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
Hey, Juan, it's been awesome having you on the show. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention on the way out, or you all good?
I mean, the only thing I keep thinking is this is the first time in my whole life anybody has ever described me as a good communicator. So, uh, I certainly wouldn't have ever described myself like that, especially many years ago. So it's just proof that, if you work on these things, then you'll get better.
Yep. Slow. We never see our own progress.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you are a good communicator, as seen here today, and thank you so much, Juan.
All
We'll
right.
look
You're
forward
welcome.
to
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
yeah, hopefully have you on again.
Absolutely.